This is Mike Richards, rawmkerichards.com. You're watching the best of shows through 2017. I'm kind of slurring like I'm drinking eggnog already. Imagine me drinking. You know, I know a lot of people are mean to Americans, and I'm not one of those. I certainly don't hammer on my American friends. I lived there for a year. I've worked there time and time again. But when you want Americans to not look good, it generally is going to have something to do with a woman like this.
I have an announcement to make to y'all, to the people of America. I was at this here McDonald's on Dorset. It's Monday night.
Beautiful hair.
I was just disrespected in there. Almost got in a fight with the gal in there.
No.
First of all, my first issue is the drive-through was filled all the way up, and I had to walk inside.
Oh.
So then I'm already mad because I got to get out my car and go inside. So I go inside. I politely say, "Hey, can I have a McRib meal, large size with the Dr. Pepper?"
Of course.
And the lady said, "Well, okay, that'd be $6.58." I said, "Ain't you forgetting something, ma'am?" And she said, "Well, what?" I said, "You're supposed to offer me the extra McRib for $1 when you buy the McRib meal." You ain't gonna believe it. She looked me up and down.
No.
And she said, "Well, it don't look like you need the extra McRib." "Excuse me, bitch." I throat punched that bitch. I knocked her ass down. So if you come to the Dorset McDonald's and you see a lady named Charlene in there, tell her Carla sent you. And then you throat punch her or punch her in the cooter. I don't give a damn.
Oh, cooter.
This is against my civil rights.
Of course it is.
Fuck you, McDonald's.
Oh, no.
On Dorset. Not all the other ones. I like all the other ones.
No. She likes all the other ones.
Oh, man, she needs some Vic Newman in her life.
What? Coming up, The Carter Effect. Sean Menard has done an unbelievable doc that is going to be played at the Toronto International Film Festival. When we come back, we're going to talk to the director. Here's just a little look.
We're here with the newest member of the Toronto Raptors, Vince Carter, drafted number 5 overall. Vince, tell me how excited you are about playing in Toronto.
You know how popular that thing is going to be, The Carter Effect. And I think of any study of something that you wanted to do in terms of subject matter in Toronto, specifically at this particular time in history, I think, where the feelings about this particular athlete, I think, have drastically changed over the last 4 or 5 years. Sean Menard joining us here on Raw Mike Richards. Thanks so much for coming in, Sean.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know what? I got to be honest. The name Vince Carter, as you very well know, because you not only have you done obviously this extensive film, but when you lived it, when you saw it. I have a son who we watched that final shot when it falls short against Philadelphia. We had to go through the anger of how dare you receive a diploma on the biggest there's so much, and then the interview where he says I'm not dunking anymore, and then he explains that, well, I wasn't trying, or all this kind of stuff, where he became, I think at some point, Sean, what do we say, the most despised athlete maybe in Toronto, depending on who you talk to, and of a certain age group too, because there are some who don't
from being the king.
Well, the younger generation, definitely. I don't think we felt that.
Yeah. No,
the despise
you did not. No, but
he's a hero to us.
At 54, I'm going, you. I'll tell you what. It felt like betrayal. There was a hurt about it, and so in terms of you venturing to do a film like this, there's so much ground to cover. How did this come into your head? What gives you this idea that you're going to make a film like this?
Well, this was a project I tried for a couple of years pitching around to networks up here, actually, in Canada, and I didn't have any luck.
You're kidding.
Which is surprising. Yeah.
Oh,
And-
my
and
God,
my
Sims.
mentality's always been find American subjects, to find to that, that network and that fan base down south. So this project I thought was dead in the water. And then I had finished my first feature film called Fight Mom. It followed a female MMA fighter who's also a mom. She makes it to the UFC. And LeBron James just starts his production company. And that's the first project that they picked up. We partnered.
That's unbelievable, Sean. Sean, now where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
I'm from Hamilton.
He's a Hamilton.
You're
guy.
from the Hammer. What high school did you go to?
I went to Sir Allen McNabb.
See, I would have guessed Catholic boy. I would have thought no.
No, man.
No,
man.
you hated them. That's what you hated.
Yeah,
So
there was a rivalry.
yeah, so there you go. You're now for those that might remember, you were on the Score.
Yeah, way back.
Way
Yeah.
back.
I was in a reality show.
Okay, you go from that, and then you get what? A phone call from LeBron James people that say we'd like to partner with you.
The way you say it sounds like there was no struggle, and it was just
No.
the following week. There were about 5 years.
I'm
7
sifting
years in
through
there.
that. I mean, you could have been a waiter. Maybe you're down underneath the gardener washing windows.
Yeah,
I don't know what
it
happened in
wasn't
that period.
far away. Yeah.
But you get to a point where that's just. There's a lot of people who have spent their whole lives doing this kind of work, and they're never getting that call.
Right. So, I mean, I had left the Score. I was working there as a producer for a couple years. Shout out to Irene.
Yeah,
Dave's
absolutely.
wife.
She said hi, by the
Oh,
way.
oh,
She
nice.
says, make sure you say hi to Sean today. You guys
Do it
haven't
on
seen
air,
each other.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I had left there, and I had joined up with TSN for a little while, and I was doing promos for a few weeks, and I just thought I'm a storyteller. I can't do the things that I want to do here. So I left and took a chance, and I just decided I'm going to make sports documentaries, and after they're done, I'm going to try and find a home for them. So I started selling them back to Sportsnet, TSN. I did about 5 of them. And then after a while, I wanted to stretch my legs. I was like, okay, those are half-hour docs. I want to make feature length. And then I started making Fight Mom. But to your point, for a director, it's not like people are just cutting checks saying, oh, you've never made a film before, but here you go. So I had to finance that whole thing, Fight Mom myself. And I went into, I left my apartment. I was like, I got to save money on rent, couch surfing, money in, money out. And then after I got to a point where it was almost done, LeBron's team decided to come in.
It's and Dave can speak to this as well. When starting a project like this, a very good friend of mine, John Belbick, shout out to Johnny. He said, "Okay, so you want to do this thing." It's not necessarily against the grain. He goes, but I know what your personality is. I know why you're doing this, and it's the right thing to do. But he looks at me and he says, so how much pain can you take? I said, I beg your pardon? Pain. How much pain can you take? And pain means money. How long can you go with no money coming in? What are you prepared to give up? And I think when you talk about what you just said, that's pain. And so how many years do you think?
I was willing to die for it. I
Yeah.
mean, I was willing to endure whatever it took to get to the point where I could reach, or there's these stories inside me that I wanted to get out, and this art that I wanted to tell, and yeah, that was the pain I was willing to take to get to that point, right?
Yeah, it's amazing, and there's a bigger side of it, and I hope one day maybe you do a documentary on yourself on how you got to the point where you are. And I know there's still a lot of stuff to talk about in the future, but let's talk about the Carter effect here. As far as the premise of the story, fans out there, what should they expect from it? Is this Vince Carter as a Toronto Raptor from day one to end of day, or is it Vince Carter till this day with the Memphis Grizzlies?
We don't cover too much of his recent later half.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's the early years.
Okay.
It's it starts. The film opens where Toronto was as a franchise from literally day one. Press conference announcing the team name as the Toronto Raptors, and then the trajectory of Tracy McGrady coming in and Vince Carter, where he came from, and all that happened on the draft. I mean, there was a lot of drama even on drafting Vince.
Sure,
I think
it
that
was,
was
yeah.
one thing that I even sat down. Whether I forgot or I definitely wasn't paying attention back there. And I thought, oh yeah, the Raptors didn't even draft this guy.
No, it was a trade with the Golden State Warriors, right?
For his
Yeah.
roommate.
That's right.
Jameson. So yeah, and then we cover obviously the glory years and the rise and the fall.
So in talking with him, because most people are never going to get this close to a guy who is one of the biggest names of our generation. And in Canada, unless you're going to talk about Steve Nash, which is a separate issue,
He doesn't even have an agent anymore. He's not an easy guy to.
What,
to get a
Vince?
hold.
Vince?
Oh yeah.
So he's
Really?
doing it himself.
Yeah, he's got a team, but I mean, I had to go through the Memphis PR. But that was the interesting thing. We just took a jump, and we were filming this thing well into it. Vince was one of the last, literally the last interview I got.
I was going to say, how does Vince sign off on this? Because this is Vince. This is about Vince Carter.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy because if you don't have Vince, you obviously don't really have a film. So, and we knew that we wanted this thing to premiere at TIFF. We were hoping, that it was going to get to that point, and I was.
Now, do
confident.
they have to invite you? Is there like some sort of approval process? Like, how does that work for TIFF?
You just submit,
You
and
submit.
then you hope that it's a good enough story and a good enough film. I was confident in the project. I in my opinion, I think it's the greatest NBA doc ever made.
Cool.
I think it's up there in one of the better sports docs ever made. And I mean, no one dies. There's not the huge drama, but for an American to come here and do what he did in the way that he did it, I always say if Vince Carter was a 3-point shooter or a fundamental guy in the post, we wouldn't even
Yeah.
be talking about the Carter effect.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
So, coming out of this, what do you think of Vince Carter? What do you think of him? Because you got closer than certainly anyone in this room, and probably most of the people watching and listening across the country today.
I love the dude, man.
Yeah.
I mean, for him that was the thing. We were told we were going to have 20 minutes. And when I sit down with Vince, it was, Grizzlies PR giving the rap sign and Vince saying, sit down, we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
And, and he just, the way he lit up going back there, you could tell, you talk about the hurt that the fan base has. There's probably that same equal hurt on Vince's end for how he views things a lot more. He also has another side of it that the fans don't get to hear.
Right.
The business end. And I think it's interesting because some athletes can lay that out. Vince kind of chose to just go about his business. But I also think he takes pride in being the oldest NBA player right now, 40 years old, because a lot of people would say, he's soft or he's injury prone. And now, that he's standing the test of time. And
See, people say that, but the guys he played with would argue differently.
that's the interesting
Yeah.
thing. Well, if he's the type of player that really quit on his team, wouldn't his current teammates been really upset? When I go back and talk to them, there was none of that. There was a whole other. They would always say, "You don't know the other side of things."
Right.
And you could tell. I mean, even speaking with Jalen Rose, he would say, when a franchise wants to rediscover themselves or have their own sense of identity, and they know it's not a popular move getting rid of a franchise player, what do? And typically, Jalen says it in the film, is they start feeding things to the media that may or may not be true, or start to kind of bring this guy down so that when he does eventually leave, they don't kind of turn on. It's a business. I get it, but that was the interesting thing. I didn't expect to go down that rabbit hole and kind of discover that.
A lot of names behind it here. Vince Carter, of course, Drake, David Stern, Tracy McGrady, Michelle Carter-Scott, Steve Nash. When you're sitting down with these people talking about Jalen Rose, as you brought up, when you're sitting down talking to the different people, are you you kind of touched on it with your last answer, but you got an idea in your head, and you got the puzzle. And all of a sudden, this puzzle's getting bigger and bigger. Are you feeling this while you're talking to these different people? And you're like, man, this monster is now became like the Andre the Giant of monsters, so to speak.
And that's an important part too. You have a rough idea of what the film is going to be, but you don't fully know because
Right.
I don't use voiceover. I don't use my voice. So the entire narrative I have to get out of you when I'm interviewing you or whoever the athlete is. So I might think, this section might be very interesting. But if I'm not getting those sound bites, now I have to go into a different path. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the puzzle piece. That's exactly, especially when you get all those interviews. And we interviewed, about 35, 36 different people, which is a
yeah.
massive amount. And you get down and you figure out, okay, every piece can fit in this particular puzzle. But what's the best one? What's the story that we're trying to tell? And, therein lies the challenge, right?
Right.
We're in conversation with Sean Menard here on rawmicrichards.com, watching on the website, of course, the dedicated YouTube channel. The Carter Effect is the movie, the Toronto International Film Festival. Sean Menard, the everything. So in film, director,
Yeah,
the
director,
producer,
producer, editor,
the
writer.
the commandant of the movie. And some of the names that you mentioned too. I mean, we talk about Steve Nash, and so there's another guy that I've always wanted to talk to and never did. There's another guy whose story is so unlike almost any other. I mean, you got this British background and a guy who's out in Victoria and loves soccer, and then he goes to was it Santa Clara? He goes to Santa Clara. He's not only a white boy, like a really white boy. He's a back-to-back MVP, star of the NBA. Whether you want to argue about whether it should be back-to-back or not, that's another conversation. So you're sitting in front of him now. I mean, in terms of coolness of a project, like, what's your next one? What are you talking to the Pope and all of a sudden, Jesus, what are you doing here? This is crazy. High five. Like, this is really something. You've really hit on a project. And what was it like with Steve Nash talking to him?
Nash was great. Nash, we definitely, obviously he talked about Vince, but for Steve, I wanted to get his part on the effect, the after part. And like you said, for a Canadian player in his time to get that scholarship down to Santa Clara, was it?
Mm-hmm. Santa Clara, yeah.
I mean, that's not a big time, perennial
it's not.
college powerhouse by any means. So for him to see, and that to be honest with you, that's where this project even kind of came to life for me, is that I'm a big college hoops fan, and I would start watching all these big time players, and all of a sudden I would see their hometowns, or I would watch the recruiting web pages, and I would see their hometowns and say, oh, Toronto, Mississauga, oh, that's interesting. And then you check the year they were born, and then you kind of start backtracking a bit, and you go, okay.
Yes.
Well, how old were they when Vince was doing his thing? And that's the impressionable age, right? 6 to 8, 9.
Absolutely.
When you're watching that thing, and that was a big thing to get out of Steve was the impact that, because I think Steve will say, like, these players, they don't quote me as the one, these.
Well, Jamal McGlure is very open about that influence of Vince Carter. Very open about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, the other thing that you bring to light is there was a time where when you're looking at the hometowns and you're trying to see, like, so when Leo Routens goes to Syracuse, I'm losing my mind. A guy from Toronto. He's going to play for Jim Boeheim, and I'm going to see him on TV, and maybe see him on TV. Probably come. Like, there was a time for Canadians that if the guy just got some scrub time in the last couple of minutes, go, yeah, that guy's from Mississauga. Can you believe it? Now we get guys who are getting drafted number one.
One and done.
All these tremendous things. Basketball has come a long way. To think that Vince did not have influence on Tristan Thompson or Corey Joseph. I mean, you can go down the line. Andrew Wiggins. You start to realize, and I think this is why the softening has happened. Like, if he truly was that bad a dude, even though he won, I don't think you'd see what you've seen. Because I think that's what's taken some of the anger out of it. What do you think?
You're exactly right, and that's a big part of the film is the impact that he had on the country and the culture and changing people's lives. Young Canadian players, that it took a player just to be able to see that Toronto across the chest on that big stage. You see it in music with Drake. You're seeing all these other young artists now look up to a guy like Drake because he's from here. I mean, first of all, Drake and what he's been able to do in the music industry is crazy. To have somebody in that world of hip-hop be...
Oh, he's Hall of Fame in his own category.
We never had someone like that from here.
Right.
No.
Yeah, and Drake's part of this project. Speaking of Drake, one of the executive producers, he's also on the film itself. How did I guess from the influence of Drake, you just kind of touched on it. He wasn't an NBA prospect or anything, but definitely influenced by Vince Carter in that era. How did he fit into this project, and how did you get him on board?
Well, I mean, it's funny how these superstars, whether in music or athletics, they all kind of hang out and talk, right? So LeBron and Drake have a nice relationship going, and to my best knowledge, they just kind of approached him just to be in the film. And Drake and his team all of a sudden said, "Whoa, this is a project that's near and dear to us."
Sure.
Drake will even say that in his music. In his career, Vince was a huge impact for him. So they wanted to be involved right from early on, just making sure that they were, because let's face it, American production company, Drake doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, so they wanted to make sure it was done right. It was done to a level where if they were going to attach themselves, they wanted to be proud of it. And September 9th, it's premiering over at Prince of Wales, which is not a small. That's the largest venue at the entire Toronto Film Festival.
It's a great venue too. That's a beautiful.
And they're all coming out for red carpet event. I mean, it's going to be a star-studded lineup, and so that's kind of how Drake got involved. And shout out to those guys, because in talking to them, you see people make it from their hometowns, and then they go off and they might be building their mansions in LA, and they don't come back as much. But for those guys, they take so much pride into shining the biggest spotlight on this city.
Sure.
They are so passionate about it, and they just want it to grow and be recognized as the best in music, fashion, sports, culture, everything. So that's how they got kind of involved, and it's kind of grown from there.
You talk about September 9th. Before you were on, Mike and I were kind of talking about this project going into TIFF. When you look at the star power behind it, this might be the biggest event at TIFF, in my opinion. And I would be shocked, and you can throw Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in a star-studded whatever. This documentary, this film, will be bigger than this. That's enormous.
It's funny as an independent filmmaker having to go on the grind and get people out to your films, or hoping that people. I don't even have to do any promotion.
No.
This film sells itself.
Absolutely.
Look at the trailer; it doesn't even have any dialogue.
No.
So I just shot show faces.
Actually, it is a little lazy. I got to admit, I wrote that down. Lazy Sean Menard. I was about a couple of words every once in a while. But the impact of the faces that you see on there, and this actually plays into what Toronto has really been embraced for around the world, is its diversity, the diversity. And to think at some point that I would connect a National Basketball Association team with a Sikh who sits underneath the basket and literally throws... Well, I'm going to call it a turban. Is it a turban? Don't get mad. But that's what he did until they said you can't do that anymore. And yet, he's embraced as literally being part of the Raptors. And you talk to him.
Yeah, the superfan. Yeah, I mean, he's a byproduct and kind of reflection of when you go to a Raptors game, it's different. It looks different in the stands than any other NBA arena. And it does. And that's a reflection of our beautiful city. I mean, that's, in my opinion, what makes a city the best in the world, right?
Yeah.
You have all different cultures coming together. And it's interesting that he's kind of become the face. And even on the NBA, he's like the chairman of diversity. They've brought him along. And
because generally, there'd be a time in the city where that would have been hated. That just the understanding that he did not have a white face and was doing that. There'd be a time probably, I'm saying even in the 70s, where that all of a sudden would be frowned upon. But as you mentioned, the demographic of what the Raptors bring. And I would argue to a degree TFC is a real reflection of that too. I mean, it's just all over the map in terms of who goes to those games. It's what makes Toronto special. And I think since the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star Day, I also think that just boosted it and highlighted it even more. And I think players from around the world, because that's what the NBA is, look at this city and go, well, this wouldn't be bad to play in. Like, I really think it has become an attractive city to play this particular sport in. And if you're drawing all the way back and putting a pin at the start, as much as I think some people would say, well, Damon Stoudemire of the time was and of the time it was, but you can't put that even in the same universe as Vince Carter.
No, I mean, Damon didn't open up a nightclub here. You know what I mean? And that's what Vince partnered in the nightclub, and he wanted his idea was there needs to be something for these players to go and do after the games when they're here on the road, show how great this city is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the players, and you guys saw it, right? A lot of and hear about Americans when they get drafted, they wouldn't want to come here, or as soon as their rookie contract's up, they're out.
And wives didn't want to come here. Of the players, is saying, I'm not going up there.
That was one of the interesting things talking to the players is that you would keep hearing some of the former guys and talk about their time in Toronto. They would say it was really safe. And I kept hearing that across the line. Safe. Why am I keep hearing this? And then I started, kind of dissecting it and understanding that some of these players that would play in certain American cities wouldn't feel that comfortable with their wives and kids going out, in a certain area. In downtown Memphis even is no picnic.
No, in fact, it can be really scuzzy at
it
times.
isn't. I've been
yeah, absolutely.
You're bang
There are
on.
some places in America that you just, especially in and around the arenas at
They can
night.
look third world. You go around New Orleans and take a look, and it's even worse after Katrina. And so you've got to understand that in Houston, what's going to happen down there as well is going to be very difficult, and it also brings out desperation in people because that's really what we're talking about. But it's interesting that you say that because they're also, I don't know because we certainly don't want to give away anything that's in the film because you want to go see it. There's always talk about Vince's mom too. So these are things that we honestly, and I'm in the business at that point. So 2001 is the team the Team 1050. It's the team at this point. You hear all this innuendo and stuff about his mom starts coming up. I'm like, where does that start? Because quite honestly, to regurgitate it on the air, I'm full of shit because I really don't even know if the story's true or not. And guys would go on and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I went down that road with Vince's mom. She gave a great interview. My God, it was 90 minutes with her, one of the longer ones, and it was just. I noticed from doing other projects when you ask somebody a question and they go on at a certain length, and next thing you know, this interview's half hour. You've only asked 2 or 3 questions. There's a reason for it. That person has something inside that they've been wanting to get out. They just haven't been asked.
Sure.
And she was that case, and we got a nice trust going where she ended up saying things that she had never said on camera before, which was great. But then, as my job was, there's a thin line. Is this a Vince Carter documentary, and that's gonna cater towards the diehard sports fans that lived and breathed it, or is there something more here I always say any project I do, whether it's a hockey player or baseball player, yeah, I'm gonna get that fan base right out of the gate. But to me, the challenge and the skill part is I want to get that bigger market, the people that don't care about.
It should stand on its own, that film, rather you're an X's and O's kind of guy.
It's an injustice to call it just a sports film. In fact, that bothers me when people kind of label me, even as you make sports films. There's almost this, you see it definitely in the film festival circuits. They got their, certain way they like to.
Guys, the pipes going, yes, you're the one who covers the people who bounce balls and so on. Yes.
Exactly. So that's why I even take a pride out of this, and we see it being highlighted so much, and you have the festival, talking it up so to such a degree is it's not just a basketball film. So my job was kind of figuring out how far to go in with because there was issues over her having her own parking space. You remember?
Yes,
the
yes,
Arcana Center?
that's right.
That was one of the stories.
Yeah.
One of the stories.
And it didn't make it in the film, but her response was interesting. Is that before that she would park across the street or 2 blocks away. Then all of a sudden, the televised games would start showing her reactions in the crowd. Now all of a sudden she's walking the 2 blocks, and now all of a sudden people are recognizing her, coming up to her, and it starts to get to a point where in the beginning it's fun, but then all of a sudden maybe Vince isn't playing so well,
Right.
and you have some people drinking a little bit before the game.
Sure.
And
Russell does that all the time, by the way. He's heavy drinker.
Shout out to Russell.
Yeah.
So you got guys like Russell maybe accosting her before the game.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
And now all of a sudden she's mentioning this to Vince or mentioning to the PR, and they say, well, you know what? What we're going to do, we're going to give you this spot. She was the only family member to receive this parking spot. Now all of a sudden,
This story is 180, completely different than anyone who had perspective on it.
Bingo.
so I mean, you start getting these little things. You start getting the other side of things, and all that. Although that's interesting, you start getting to the point where you start. What do they say? There's like a term for it. You're killing your babies, or having to figure out which little storylines or which little scenes are leaving the film.
Right. Sure.
That becomes tough for you. The editing process, all of a sudden, because let's face it, in your world, depending on how you edit this thing, you can have 8 different kinds of movies if you wanted.
100%. And that's the job of any good storyteller is you want to make sure that you're going on this line, and any little storyline or feature that comes up, you have to ask yourself, is this stalling us where we need to go, derailing us, or is this keeping us on our path? And that was one of those particular things that you fit it in, you go, yeah, that's great for the diehards or the people that know about it, but someone that's watching this in random USA, maybe not so much.
Right. We're sitting here in 2017, and to this day, anytime you're watching anything with the NBA, and it's hard to believe that it's been 17 years, but the Vince Carter, it's overreaction still gets played in and out of because it's the coolest highlight. The dunk was fantastic, but the reaction of it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
What impact did that have on Vince, considering that sometimes we look at the NBA dunk competition today as in
jump the shark, that's what they call it.
Who signed
literally
up for it now because they don't have the Vince Carters and the Michael Jordans and the bigger names, Wilkins, guys like that of the past. What did that mean to him at that time?
Right from the start, I said from the jump, NBA footage obviously costs money.
Sure.
For each second that appears in the film. So there we were.
Wow.
We had some nice leeway. I feel LeBron's has a little bit of pull in that.
bit, yeah.
So that was great. But I said I want to make sure that I want people to feel when it gets to that slam dunk contest section. That to me is probably the most important aspect of this entire effect, so to speak, or his career. And the fact that he was wearing Toronto across his chest.
Yes.
And I think my biggest thing is I need to make sure I want people to feel how they felt when they first watched it. In that I don't want a dunk to go, and then in the film we cut back and Vince starts talking about, oh yeah, Tracy held the ball up, and I don't want to ruin the momentum or have other people's reactions. I got those just in case, but when I sat down, I felt very strongly that this needs to speak for itself. This needs to play raw. I want people to feel it in a way that they maybe haven't felt since they first watched it. We added some beautiful music. Had a great composer, Thomas Caffey, out of Los Angeles. We brought in some strings to lay down, and we really felt that the reactions and the video spoke for itself, and also hearing the announcer's voice is what they're watching. I mean, they didn't even know how to call it, and their reactions have become iconic.
Yes.
Even saying that it's over, it's over.
Like, who hasn't done that to this day? Even if you're out, playing regular ball with buddies, or you make a golf putt, or anything. You know what I mean? It's such a universal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would go on YouTube and I would type in a Vince Carter interview, and I would see that he would talk about each dunk many times over, and I felt like I wanted to try and get reactions out of him that weren't just stock answers that he'd had for the last 20 years. So when we sat down, I said, listen, the dunk competition is going to speak for itself. We're not going to go into each dunk, but I want to know every step leading up to it that day, because there's a whole other side of things that people don't necessarily know that went in before the slam dunk competition. And I just see his face light up. I think he really liked that because one thing I didn't realize is how this dunk contest, it wasn't just something that he just said one day, oh, I'm just going to enter this. This is something that he's been studied leading up for his whole career, even though he was still young at that point. But this was the dream when he made it to the NBA to take part in this. So I'm very excited. I spent the most probably editing time and
awesome.
Analyzing on the slam dunk competition part. And if you don't have goosebumps going through your entire body, you check for a pulse, because that's a special part in the film.
The film is called The Carter Effect. The director, producer, Sean Menard here on rawmike.richards.com. It just, I can't wait to see it. I really can't wait to see it. And you also brought up, we talk about some of the issues. You talk about his, his mom and some of those issues. You've talked about those who, watched him. Those he played with, I don't know if there was a bigger name in terms of that story than Tracy McGrady. We just heard about, how the surroundings that his mom had about some of those stories that turned out completely different. Were you taken by what Tracy McGrady had to offer in the film?
Of course. First of all, just interviewing Tracy was a very bizarre experience because normally the athlete or the particular star maybe is not on time. You're set it up and you're waiting for quite a while. This particular day, we had filmed with him behind the scenes at ESPN. He was shooting a show called The Jump. And we're in Los Angeles, and we go across the street to the hotel, and we start setting up. And then all of a sudden, Tracy walks in, and he just sits down. And I was talking up his bodyguard, and we were kind of hitting it off, talking college football off camera. And then all of a sudden, Tracy's like, hey, can we just do this now? And I look around, the crew is just shocked because now one of the biggest stars that we're looking to interview has just walked in and asked, can we do this now?
That never happens.
Never happens. And we are not set up at all.
No,
I just see the color go out of my cinematographer's face. So I go, well, it's going to be about, half hour. And that's, usually an hour is maybe like a pretty good. So he's, all right, I'll wait, and just sits down.
He's just sitting there now.
So now he's just sitting in the room. The crew is just trying to set up as fast as they can. And so I was able to this, which was great about it, is now I'm able to get a bit of a trust system going now with
Yes,
Tracy,
yes.
and I'm able to talk him up.
Just like you did with the bodyguard kind of thing, the rapport, right?
Exactly. And then I think once people feel like you're doing something that's well researched, you're not, you've done your work, or you know that this is something maybe a little bit different than what they're used to, then all of a sudden they feel, especially when they find out who else is in the film. That was the biggest thing. We had
Right.
some players that would say, no, not interested, because I kind of understand these guys are retired or they're busy. No one's paying them money to be on camera. You want to come in and talk about this thing about Vince Carter. But then as soon as they would hear who else was in it, it was almost as though they would say, "Oh, I want to. Okay, I'll take part."
Yeah.
So Tracy was great. So by the time we got on camera, we had a real good rapport.
Yeah,
And
you're in fifth gear, basically. That's awesome. What a great story.
See, because you're praying for that, Dave, because you know when you have to interview an athlete,
Oh.
when you're hoping for something.
Some people
you-
to take what
Yeah.
Sean just said. I've been around some athletes on the sit-down interview. Obviously, not to the level of what you're doing, but when you sit down with an athlete, you have everything set up on double cameras. If you say 5 minutes to an athlete, they get pissy.
Yeah.
They sit there and they think you just told them. How about 5 hours?
Yeah.
It's like no, just give me 5 minutes, and I could feel exactly what you're going through in that situation.
J.R. Reed ate a ham sandwich in front of me one time. We were live from Gretzky's. It was me and Derringer, and so we're sitting there, and as John is talking, so what did I it was in the day I started doing Pee Wee, going, oh, guess you're hungry, eating a ham sandwich. Like, what are you supposed to say,
They couldn't
right?
care less, right? A lot of them, right? They don't understand, to your point, that the crew is here and how big of a deal
Oh,
it means
yeah.
to you and how much you
Absolutely.
really need. If I don't get good sound bites out of Tracy McGrady, I'm already thinking, and that's why this project, I've never felt the pressure, because my boys, my crew, my friends would, if they're like constantly like, you better not, can we? I don't know if we can swear on this, but it was like,
Yeah, of course you can. It's Ron Mike Richards. You can do what you want.
you better not fuck this up.
Yeah,
Bernard."
yeah.
Straight up, all
Yeah.
the time.
That's great support system. Don't fuck it up. Okay, and action.
I think we all have friends
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
Awesome.
if I'm off doing a story about something else, that's one thing. But now I'm in my hometown now, right? I've lived in Toronto for a decade, so
Yeah.
getting Tracy was pivotal, right? Especially for those early years, and being able to get his take on everything. It's so interesting to see it too. He was just a kid when he came up here, every
Sure he
bit of
was.
18.
And
Yeah.
you know what? I think people kind of, and this is why it's great that you talk about it in a way in which it really is. It's storytelling. You're telling someone's history, and when these privileged, to a degree, privileged athlete, you think that there's going to be an air about it. You think there's going to be an arrogance just because we've seen it on television for maybe the last 3-4 years, whether they come from North Carolina or whether they come from UCLA at the time, whatever school it happens to be, and then you meet them. I remember looking years ago at Rocket Ishmael, and so I see that crazy bowl game, and he returns it for what? It was two kick returns he had in that game for Notre Dame. Maybe it was 3. I don't remember. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy. And then I hear the money. So there's McNall and Gretzky and Candy. I'm thinking, this guy's going to be probably unbearable. He comes into the
This is the early Argos.
This is
Those
yes.
Yeah.
This
It's
this
1990, I guess.
comes in
Yeah.
and he comes in sort of towards the fan, and he's with his mom, and his mom said the same thing that you just mentioned. I'm glad he's coming here because it's safe. That was number one. Number two, it was a racial comment in that. Not that she was racist. She was saying that she wanted to come to a place where diversity was embraced, that there wouldn't be that racial pressure. And then he was shy as shy gets. I mean, it was going to be tough to get something out of him because, he was very wide-eyed, and at that time, he's a kid.
And
we
that-
forget that.
Yeah, you do, and that was a big part of my job, is stripping back the athlete, or I always say that these guys are doing the extraordinary, but to them it's ordinary. To them it's where do I have to be? It's their day job.
Sure.
So being able to kind of strip that away and let the audience see them as, I'm not just regular people, but kind of, right, in a sense that just you get to understand them a little bit more, which is very important.
From a basketball standpoint, I don't know if you fall into the same boat I'm in. Vince Carter's 40 years old right now. This is just opinion right now. And he's wearing a Memphis Grizzlies jersey. It kind of, as a Raptor fan, I'm kind of pissed that he's not, You know, and I'm not saying this is his last year because we don't know that. The guy still looks like he could go a couple more years for sure.
And it already dates it now that he's in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Well,
Sacramento
there is
now.
my mistake.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I sit there and I look at that and I go, why isn't he wearing a Raptor jersey to close out? Does he ever talk about anything like that, or is there? Like I said, I don't want to ruin anything, and it's not really something that would surprise me if he said, yeah, I'd love to close out with the Raptors one day, even if it's a 1-day contract. But maybe from your perspective, are you kind of disappointed that he isn't a Toronto Raptor right now, considering we're in the last call of the career?
I am, definitely. I
Yeah.
think it's a kind of a missed opportunity for the Raptors organization. Just first of all, whatever you offered Vince, and I don't think they could have came up to $8 million at Sacramento, but if they could have got closer to that and made him an offer, don't you think they would have made? How much would they make on merchandising?
Bingo.
Oh.
Right away.
Yeah, you could have went retro jersey, real jersey, this jersey, everything Carter.
And not only that, I know Memphis was really trying to keep him because he was like another coach. The players really looked up to him as well. The respect. I just think he could add a lot, especially with a team that's looking to get over that next little hump, right, in the playoffs. But everyone I'm talking to, Vince included, and everyone in his inner circle has kind of told me he's got another. He's got another, meaning beyond this upcoming NBA season, he wants to do one more.
Yeah.
So he's only signed a 1-year deal with Sacramento. Maybe.
Yeah.
And this is just
Crossing our fingers.
Oh, God.
just theorizing.
That would be crazy. That would be just crazy.
Return of the King, basically.
Because and really at this point, and again, it's so rare that you become the most loved athlete to the most hated athlete, and then back to the most loved athlete, because that's what would happen. Because I think the place would go banana. Because now you're talking about the generation that grew up with him as the man.
Well, what happened with LeBron,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
LeBron coming back to that's on a bigger scale.
Sure it
obviously,
is. Yeah,
and
burned his jersey at one point.
Still in the prime, but I think time heals, and I think this film is a nice step towards looking back and seeing the kind of player he was and the enthusiasm. That's the thing is, when you start to, off the top, you were talking about his unwillingness to dunk, and he wasn't trying, but in those early years, the way he did it, the enthusiasm, the energy,
Sure.
the faces he would make after he would dunk and run up the court, all that kind of stuff, it just ignites that. How can you not cheer for him and root for him when you watch that stuff?
So it's going to be at TIFF for a couple of weeks. What for fans that can't get out to see it at TIFF because it's going to be a tough ticket. I want to beg you for tickets right now on the air, but I'm not. So,
No, beg for tickets. Do we get to go to the what do they call it? The opener? I'm not a film person. Do we get to go to the home opener?
Premiere, Mike.
Yeah. You can tell, eh? Where can fans see this once TIFF finishes up? Because TIFF's only so long, and then after that, I mean, what happens to the actual project so everybody can
theatrical
see it?
release?
I don't think theatrical. It's a free agent, so they're talking to various outlets.
No, be on Netflix. That would be good. Can we get Netflix? Can we get you to do Netflix?
I don't have control over that stuff. I know the name's been floated around, so I'm not sure where we'll end up, but it will definitely be in a place where people will be able to.
Russell, get Drake on the phone. What's he doing? Oh, he's being lazy too. Come on, do something. Sean, because this is the first time we've met, and Dave's told
This
me
is nice
some
that
things,
I thought this was come in for 5 and like my other press.
No.
We get to actually
we got the
have a
cameras
conversation.
going too.
Oh,
Yeah,
I can tell you that this so those they're watching live right now on either the website or YouTube, but there's obviously those that will be listening on iTunes and Google Play and all those things today. This will be heavily downloaded because simply the subject matter, Sean, is I mean, and it's topical. I mean, sometimes it's like, Russell asked me before he came on, he said, does he die in the end? No, he doesn't die in the end, Russell. That's not the kind of movie he made.
Russell doesn't really know these things.
So I mean, it's a bit of a trigger point. It still is. If you talk to people again over the age of 50, I'm not saying that I think there's still some love coming back, but there would be 20-30% who still would have this anger, this feeling, and when you've got that as a subject matter, you're gold. You're golden. And I think that for the kinds of subjects that you're picking, I guess for me, I'm looking at you, young guy, you're just killing it out there. After this, then what can you now choose a project? Are we that big now?
Yeah, well, that's That's definitely yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I'm already lining up some meetings down south in Los
Nice.
Angeles, and
Good for you.
yeah, it's a good point to get to.
You're like
having-
Entourage now. You could be on Entourage. I'm looking at him thinking you should be one of.
He definitely fit the look. Right?
Yeah.
So and if you want to take a look at some other stuff Menard's done, I mentioned The Perfect Storm, the story about the Expos. I talked to him about that extensively on my podcast. Phenomenal. Fight Mom, exceptional status. I mean, there's a lot of your work is amazing, and it keeps on getting better and better, which is fantastic, and that's why I can't wait for the Carter Effect. And you know what, I got a feeling, I hope you don't go too big on us, but
No, I want him to be huge. Like I want Iron Man 8, Sean Menard. That's what I want
I'm
to see.
just saying, in 2018 or 19 or 2020 or anything like that, the projects are just going to keep on getting bigger and bigger, and I couldn't be happy for you, man. It's really
Appreciate
exciting,
that.
and
Thank you.
it's awesome. So
Could you work us into something? I've always wanted to be like Purse Snatcher 3, like one of those guys. Like
I don't know
in
if he's
Death
doing
Wish.
movies yet.
In
Mike.
Death Wish, shoot me in the face. I don't care. I just want to get on there, to do something. Boy, I'll tell you, I'm. It's great to finally meet you, and it's nice to see that, that people from beginnings and backgrounds. I mean, there'll be people in Hamilton that at some point they're going to be saying, well, Sean Menard went to this school. And I think that is always a good thing, not unlike the influence you're talking about, Vince Carter. Like, it's got to come from somewhere. And I think it's awesome when sort of the hometown guy does well. And now you're dealing with a hometown subject. I mean, it really does have that kind of weight for it. So I'm really excited to see it, too. So congratulations on what's going to be, I think, a fantastic debut. But I think the longevity of it. I mean, this is a kind of film that I think if you're of that age group and again, not even necessarily a sports fan, you go, did you not see The Carter Effect? It's going to be one of those. I guarantee that's going to happen for you.
I mean, that's the thing is people will say to me, "Wow, you must be. Are you feeling nervous? There's a lot of eyes, a lot of attention. There's
Sure.
all these people coming to the premiere, and
Yeah, go. Hey, don't fuck it up. Yeah.
that's the boys are saying that for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a 75-minute red carpet. I mean, I've never even thought that it would get to that level, but I'm feeling good because I'm confident this film's. Listen. It wouldn't. You can say, you attach the names behind it, and people will argue whether they would have came on board if it was a different type of project or someone else had done a different job on it. But the fact is, yeah, when you're working with this subject matter, it's already there. But to take it to the next level, that's the
Exactly.
the skill to the craft, right? And I'm feeling good. This thing's really. I'm excited for you guys to see it because it's going to live up to the hype. Absolutely, it's going to surpass it. People will come in with expectations, and I feel confident that it's gone above.
Sean, thanks so much for joining us here on the program today. Really appreciate it. Once again, that is The Carter Effect. It's right now currently going to debut at the Toronto International Film Festival. But trust me, with Sean, there's going to be so much more.
What? We just become best friends? Yep. What?
So now, people talk about comedians having pain. There's
Oh,
some
yeah.
pain.
Sure.
You have a lot of this pain.
I have a lot of pain. Look
Yeah,
at me.
yeah.
Look at me. I'm a grown man who looks like Bobby from King of the Hill. I've got pain. I've got 46 years of pain, all ready to
You're
pop.
46?
46. I know I look
Yeah.
65. Trust me. I let go of myself at age 12. It's the Quebec diet of cheese and gravy.
So the first difficulties you have as a person, does this start in elementary school? Like,
Oh,
what-
well, yeah, of course, yeah. When I was very young, I knew my life was going to be different because my parents got me the game Light Bright. Remember Light Bright, the game with pegs?
Yes.
But for some reason, I was allergic to Light Bright. The pegs had a chemical on them that gave a rash all over my body. Okay, no, figure that shit
That's
out.
weird.
That is very weird.
It's like Chuck in if you watch Better Call Saul.
Yes.
They're afraid of
Yes.
the electricity.
Yes.
And you actually have that.
Yes. So my parents, instead of taking the toy away from me, they just said to me, make sure you wear your gloves. So I'd have like these giant oven mitts on trying to build a clown with little pegs, and they kept falling off. And my mom would walk by hammered going, oh, that's a nice square. It's a clown, Mommy. It's a clown. Just go get Mommy some more gin. And so it started really early.
A lot of friends in school, or is this?
Yeah, I had some
another-
friends,
yes,
sure.
yeah,
And then probably my most famous childhood story is chasing Wayne Gretzky on an ice cream bike.
Oh.
I was a Dickie
Okay,
the ice
go
cream
ahead,
bike guy,
yes,
the
yes.
Dickie the ice cream boys,
Yeah.
the guys with the bells and the kids and the drugs.
Speaking
what I'm
of
talking about,
pedophiles, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, grooming. Hello, I was groomed. Ice cream boy, here, kid, candy. And so I lived in Brantford at the time, and Wayne was home from Edmonton training for the summer. Didn't realize it. I was on the street. He pops his head out both ways, looks, no one's there, goes for a run. I'm like, oh my God, it's Wayne Gretzky. So I chased Wayne Gretzky. I'm like, I just started going, and the bells are ringing, kids are running out, screw the kids, they're hooked on the junk, they'll find another, monkey on their back. And so Wayne saw me coming. He goes up a curb and through a park. And I tried to follow him, but I don't know if you ever analyzed the Dickie ice cream bike, but they're very top heavy.
Yes.
So I tried to bunny hop the curb, but that's not what happened. What happened? I smashed into the curb, the back shot up, I rocketed off the bike, and Wayne Gretzky fucking laughed at me.
Oh,
He laughed at me.
Yeah,
So when he
yeah.
says he was there for every kid, he wasn't there for every kid.
there's ridicule in
Yeah.
his DNA.
Yeah.
Is what you're
Someone
saying.
as nice as Wayne Gretzky's making fun of you, your life's going to be different.
What?
We are back to 5-on-5. One more chance. Shot, score! Wolf. Tippett. He finds an opening. Scores! Bastion. Day. He's got an opening. Shot! Where is it? Score!
Tippett walks in, trying to get it towards the net. Here's a chance. Michael McLeod to Tippett. He'll score. Top shelf on the 5-minute power play with 12 seconds remaining in the middle period. 5-1.
Once again, here at Caniff Golf, Linehead Golf Course, Mississauga, Ontario. Well, technically Brampton, isn't it Brampton?
Brampton, yes.
Nobody likes Brampton. Trust me on that one. But they like the Steelheads and Owen Tippett. They love Owen. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So I realized one of the things that you were excited about today was seeing me once again, being tournament champions, and I know it's a pretty big deal. Aside from I think something in, is it Chicago? Is there something in Chicago coming up?
There might be something.
Yeah, there might be a little bit of that.
I don't know. This is close to it.
Yeah, this has got to be close. But boy, I'll tell you, a crazy season. But the one thing that I noticed, Owen, is that when you go to these entry drafts, that families are there, and someone said it kind of looks like graduation, but it really is. It's just a different kind. Who will be going down with you to Chicago?
For sure. I mean, my mom, my sister, my grandparents, a couple buddies. They're all coming down with me. And it's funny you say graduation. My sister graduates a couple days before.
Oh,
so it's,
awesome.
It's kind of back to back. So.
Now, are they still all, is it Peterborough, where your family's from?
No, yeah. We're from there, but my mom lives in Oshawa with my sister.
Lives in Oshawa now. So when you think about a night like that, because, I mean, look, you had a lot of stuff going on this year. You're a busy young guy, but at some point, as they say, you sort of grasp where you are in your life. Mm-hmm. Most people are never going to be walking to the stage that you are to put on, a cap that you have seen your whole life on TV. So what is the feeling about that? Is there an anxiousness, or do you still see it as, your professional progression, or are you weirded out by the whole thing, the fact that this is going to be happening to you?
Yeah, I mean, as a little kid, you'd kind of be weirded out. You said you never really thought the day would come, but I guess now that's getting more close, I feel like it's more just anxious to see how it all kind of plays out. It's not too much nerves. It's more just kind of that anxious of getting there and seeing how it'll all play out. So I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely exciting. So when you tested at the compound, or however they say it, did you get a chance to talk to any of these teams as well? Is that when you get to go back and forth with a couple NHL teams that want to talk to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you first get there, we got there on the Sunday, and all through the week is just meetings with the teams. I think I had 26.
Wow.
Yeah, and then at the end of the week, it's the testing. So it's a busy week, but it's also an exciting time. So.
Is it mentally straining to hear the same kind of questions? And when you go team to team, do you get a lot of the same questions, or maybe the question I'm looking at is, what's the most difficult question it was to answer from I guess a room full of team management?
Yeah, there's not really too much. I mean, it's more just they only have 20 minutes with you. They're just kind of sitting down and getting to know you a little bit as a kid, like your family background, stuff like that. But no, it's really repetitive. You go room to room, and it's almost the same answers for some of them. So, I mean, some teams try and throw little questions here and there to maybe catch you off guard, but I didn't have any of that. It was more just repetitive, getting to know me. So.
Well, and because teams spend a lot of time now on trying to figure out character, like they're trying to figure out that even with schooling, like not only just a head or an IQ for the game, but just what kind of individual they're having, relationship with parents, like all that kind of stuff seems. I mean, they in the 70s, they didn't do that. I mean, I'm sure guys came in with smokes. They're 40 pounds overweight. It just wasn't that way now. So when you look at like your expectations of what you want to do you actually do that? Because I know that's a question that people ask. Or you just saying, I just want to see what unfolds on that night.
Yeah, of course, it's a lot of hard work building up to that hard night, and it's some of those teams do kind of grill you to see what kind of player you are, or what person you are. I mean, they've seen you on the ice, so now it's just their time to see what kind of kid you are. I guess what kind of guy they're going to have in the locker room more than anything. But no, you kind of just got to go through it and kind of be yourself. You can't really take on a role that you're not used to during the year. But no, for sure, it's a busy time, and it's all building up to that one night. So.
You've played a couple seasons with the Steelheads. In your first year, you scored 15 goals. Last year, you scored 44. That's a pretty significant jump. Outside of maturity as a player, what has been the difference between the 2 years that has, really put you to the spot that we talk about right now?
I would say the biggest thing is maturity. During that last summer, I tried to get as big and as strong as I can. But other than that, I feel like it's just a confidence. You got to come in more confident and self-confident. I mean, you get more comfortable your second year because you know what to kind of expect throughout the league and the busy schedule. So,
I'm not going to ask you what team you want to go to because that's just a silly question. But
well, what team do you want to go to?
But one thing I was looking at is you have a very good relationship with Alex Nylander. The Buffalo Sabres pick in the top 10. You're slated to go somewhere in the top 10. That would be kind of fun to play with a guy that you've played with in Mississauga, a guy that, the two of you were stars for the Steelheads and continue to be so, legends of this organization. Maybe talk about your relationship with Alex and you're obviously training with him a little bit in the off season and getting ready for wherever you're going to play next year.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't really talked to him recently. He's kind of been busy with his season last year, but when he was on the team, it's kind of the same as the rest of the guys on the team. We all have a really close relationship, and you kind of build that, even if you don't keep in touch that often. When you do see each other, it's the connection that you don't really forget about. So no, it's hard to kind of keep in touch because we're both on different paths. But no, it's good, and I'm glad to see he's doing well.
So for any team that picks you up and you had to actually give a little preamble on what you think you bring to a team, like for you yourself, what's the thing that you would say to a general manager or a coach that they can count on you bringing? What is it?
I would say a fast, skilled forward. I use my speed and my shot and kind of my vision to my advantage. So for sure, I'd say a skilled forward.
Now, just so you know, just beforehand, Mikey McDonald came on, and he said all kinds of terrible things about you. I mean, or McLeod rather. I was shocked at some of the stuff. You stole money from him or whatever. Something about a cell phone and pictures. I don't know what was going on. If you had to take him in a fight, could you beat up Mikey? Do you think?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't think we're either fighters, but he had one this year, so it's kind of hard to tell when you don't really see it often. So.
He said he'd like to buy a cottage and a speedboat. Should he make a lot of money?
I'd want to buy a cottage too.
Yeah.
So.
Good Ontario boys. They want to look for a cottage. Thanks so much, Owen, for joining us here today. We're very excited for you on what is going to be an exciting night in Chicago. It's such a big night for the families, and just the amount of hours and work that it goes into getting to that place. I'll feel just as happy for people like your mom and people like your grandparents who have seen it from day number one. So best of luck. We'll be watching, and thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Owen Tippett joined us here. I'll be watching Chicago, and we'll see what team he goes to. He said he doesn't have a favorite one. Is it Buffalo?
I don't know.
No, he's not. Okay. RawMikeRichards.com.
What?
To break it up before we get to some other stuff, because we're going to lighten it up a little bit. You know that bat in Irish kitchen equals funny.
Yes.
Here's what also happens. Irish man looking for packet of soup, so the dry package.
Yep.
But if you can't find it,
Oh boy.
there's also hilarity that ensues.
The fucking madness of life. What a fucking pack in the fucking soup. Wreck the shop. Wreck the fucking shop.
Wreck the shop. He's talking about the kitchen.
Nothing.
For soup.
Paul, can you relax, will you?
I want the fucking thing and I can't find the fucking... I can't find the fucking thing. I want the bloody thing.
Oh. The pots and pans he's punching.
The fucking thing's gone. Fucking appear.
A pier. That's what he's saying. It's a soup
Bloody
package.
soup gone. Now her around taking the whole fucking hole. I'm not allowed to have anything in life. Not allowed. Just taken from you, just like that. You go out and buy it and it's fucked off. Not on. Not so fucking on.
A soccer game in the background. You could hear it.
Who would have thought?
That's him stamping his feet, by the way.
Fuck off. Where are you?
Okay. Well, that's yeah. Is that okay? That's boy. I never thought soup was that important. I got to be honest. That makes people mad.
Must be good soup, eh?
Out of a package, Dave.
Well, you know, those are the best.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.